Okay, so this episode is either going to be enlightening or it's going to scare you. Sat down with an amazing individual, Sunny Ahonsi, who runs a business called FiveThirds. He's building an amazing couple of businesses, actually. A QS business serving primarily tier 1 and tier 2 contractors, but also has a BTR product that he's selling as well. Really amazing guy. He's only 33, speaks with such wisdom, speaks about the future and how things are going to change and be affected. Honestly, for his age, I thought this individual just has it absolutely nailed. Really, really love my chat with him. I'm really pleased. Shout out to Peter for recommending having a chat with him. Honestly, you guys will get a lot out of this episode, or you may be scared, but definitely worth a listen. So, welcome to the next episode of Growing Consultancies. Delighted to be joined by Sunny Ahonsi of FiveThirds.
Yep.
Welcome, Sunny.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, absolute pleasure. We've been talking a while. I know it took a little bit of time to persuade you, but I think honestly you'll find just from since me and you being connected, seeing some of your posts on LinkedIn, I think me and you've got a lot of synergies, and I think you'll find this. I think you'll find this useful, but I think people listening will find it useful to listen to you as well.
Good. Thank you.
So first of all, because I'm absolutely intrigued, where's the name come from?
FiveThirds. Yeah, really interesting. So I had to take a sabbatical at some point in my work tenure.
Okay.
And my commercial director at the time suggested, why don't you just stay on with us with what you need to do, but just stay on 3 days a week,
Right.
do what you need to do in the rest of the time.
Right.
So I made that work, and I was a senior surveyor running a £33 million job.
Right.
Had an assistant, a couple of trainees underneath me, and about 6 months in, I worked out that I was getting the same amount of work done in 3 that I was getting in 5.
Right.
And I looked back and I said, well, how have I done that? How have I managed to do that? And basically, it was cutting out all unnecessary work, meetings, distractions, politics, and it was about being really efficient. So I was getting 5 days work done in 3, and that's always stuck with me. This idea of FiveThirds, this notion that if you are efficient and you focus on what is truly important, you can benefit from that efficiency, either that be time or money.
Right, brilliant.
I've never worked 3 days again in my life since that point in time, but it really stuck with me as a mantra of what I wanted my business to be predicated on, this idea of efficient work. And if you work efficiently, everyone should be able to get the benefit from that.
Brilliant. Amazing. Good. Love it. Fantastic. So let's go back to the beginning. How did you start out as a QS?
Yeah, so my older brother's a building surveyor,
right?
And he got me into it, basically.
Right.
I didn't know what surveyor did prior to that. Saw what he was doing, asked him how he was getting into it.
I'm laughing because sorry to cut over you, mate. You're not the first person to say they knew somebody who was a building surveyor, started looking to building surveying, and did not like the idea of
worked out it's not for them. Yeah,
but
absolutely. I'm one of them.
Which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I'm one of them.
It's bizarre. That's quite a common
I didn't
thing.
have a massive fascination with building fabric, but I did like numbers.
Brilliant.
And then I went on to do some work experience,
right?
With a who was that with? Taylor Woodrow, maybe.
Right.
When I was 16, something like that, for a couple of weeks, got a feel for what goes on. And then went in and did a trainee scheme straight after that. So I started off with a fit-out firm in Essex for about a year, around 2010, but the market was challenging still at that point. And then I went on to Wilmot Dixon, where I was doing volume house building for the next 5 or 6 years after that.
Right, okay, perfect. And what happened after Wilmot Dixon?
Yeah, so then I went on and worked for a PQS sort of business, doing a lot more front-end cost planning, and worked there for about 4 years, moved over to their delivery section, so they started to self-deliver some work, then like as a client contractor.
Okay, yeah.
So did a little bit of that. Was there for 4 years, did a secondment out in Africa for a couple of years in that time as well, on some of their infrastructure projects.
Right, interesting.
And back end of 2019, I decided that I wanted to start on my own.
Right.
Eventually got started in March 2020. just before COVID, and FiveThirds was born.
Timing. It's completely bizarre. Literally, the person on this podcast before you did exactly the same. There's notice in December, started in March 2020. That's interesting. You probably find there's quite a lot of similarities between you both as well. Actually, I'll hook you up afterwards. How old are you now?
I am 33.
Right. So what, you were 28?
27.
27 when you started?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So bold, brave at the time.
Bold, yeah.
Yeah.
Very.
Was that, realistically just saying, look, I want to go freelance on a day rate, or was there a bigger plan at the time, or did the plan evolve? What is it?
Yeah. So I set up 2 businesses actually.
Yep.
So there's FiveThirds Construction Consultants, and there is FiveThirds Living. So Living is a build-to-rent development business.
Okay. At the same time?
At the same time.
Wow, okay.
My background was in volume house building.
Yeah.
I looked at property as being a good wealth vehicle, one that I aligned with. I wanted to be able to build up a portfolio and have that as the emphasis of the group. But then also knew that you needed a negatively correlated business to property development to actually keep that going. So property development is very high risk, high leverage, balance sheet plays. Your consultancy tends to be low risk, no real gearing at all, and a P&L play. And so as they negatively balanced each other out, I said I was going to have to set them both up together.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how did you go about getting the funding initially? With obviously you got track record in terms of the volume house building, but probably no track record in terms of developing yourself. So how did you go about starting the living side of the business up?
Yeah, with great difficulty. You are knocking on 1,000 doors, speaking to a lot of people, but you eventually break through. You get your first investor, you get your first project through the way, then your second, your third, fourth, fifth, and eventually it becomes a lot easier to raise the capital.
Brilliant. Yeah, and I imagine once you've got some history, some track record, then it is much easier.
Track record helps, and balance sheet helps as well, because you can give people some security. Yeah, because we hold all of our own stock.
Amazing. So how many units do you have now as a business in the living side of things?
So our portfolio value is just over 6 million quid at the minute.
Wow.
Held. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's brilliant, mate.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So at 27, how did you decide that was something to do? How did you know how to navigate that at that age?
Yeah, I think 2 things. So I read a concept recently that I think applies to me quite well. This idea that you have 2 sorts of people that are mimetic and agentic.
Right. Yeah.
So people that are mimetic will tend to follow the crowd, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, the vast majority of the population tend to be mimetic in their nature. Yeah. And then there are a few people who are highly agentic, which means that they enjoy having their own agency, and they know what to do with it, and they can use it quite meaningfully. And I worked out I've always been quite an agentic person from very young. So being sat in corporate structures for years helped me to understand what I didn't want for myself.
Yeah.
I understood the idea of being an MD of a business unit doing 1 to 300 million turnover a year for 150 grand wasn't what I wanted. And I understood that quite early. But I think at the moment I became a project surveyor, I looked at the trajectory and worked out that wasn't quite for me. So I think I'd always nursed that idea from very early on in my career.
Right.
And then I got reading as well towards my sort of mid-20s, just before I started the businesses, and worked out that if you really want to acquire wealth, you do need to build assets. That's the key differentiator. You're not going to become wealthy on a salary in our industry. We're not the sort of industry where you can become a CEO, get points, get an exit, and get a mega payout. That's not really where our industry's positioned. So I worked out that, okay, I'd need to accumulate assets. And then I also read this sort of concept about the key to becoming wealthy. It's 2 factors. You need to create capital events. So event needs to take place that generates capital. And then you need to successfully deploy that capital. And if you can keep doing that on a loop, generating capital, deploying it successfully, eventually you'll become wealthy. And so I looked at that and I said, okay, to do that, I'm going to need to be in business, because I'm going to need to create capital events through the consultancy, through property development that would actually make that possible. And then I need to acquire the skill of being a good allocator of capital as well. And so I said, okay, the inevitability here is I'm going to have to start my business at some point. Yeah.
That's still fucking impressive, mate. For a 27 to have worked all that out.
Yeah.
Imagine a lot of 27 are still trying to work out who the hell they are.
I'm doing that bit now.
Amazing. So the consultancy part of the business, what's the headcount for that?
Yeah, so our headcount's constantly growing.
Yeah.
We're going to probably add another 6 or 7 to the
Wow.
headcount by the end of the year.
Wow.
And we're targeting about 4 million in turnover in the consultancy this year.
Right.
So we are a decent size. I'll keep the exact headcount under wraps, but yeah, we're growing. What I did look at before coming is in the last 3 years, we've had 130% year-on-year growth in terms of our headcount.
Wow.
So it's, yeah.
Okay. And are they all permanently employed? Have you got some on contract?
Yeah, so we've got a few on contracts, but the vast majority of our team are permanently employed, yeah.
And am I right in saying the client base is all contractors or primarily contractors?
Yes, primarily contractors. So FiveThirds is a construction consultant for the tier 1 and tier 2 contractor.
Yeah.
Primarily.
Yeah.
We see that as a massive gap in the market, right? So your private side of the world have your TNTs, your ACOMs, your Curry Browns, Atkins Realis, whatever to go for.
Yeah.
Your main contractors have a pinch point commercially. They can't find a suitable permanent solution, and they've got to go straight into a freelancer.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes freelancers are great, and sometimes there's a real limitation in their delivery. And so our niche spot, which a few in the sector occupy as well, is catering for that tier 1, tier 2 market.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And so how have you gone about, I know you're very active on LinkedIn, so active, which is good, applaud that, as you know I am. But how have you gone about from a business development perspective to because notoriously a lot of tier 1s and tier 2s, and unless you've got relationships with them, they're difficult to crack, difficult to get on the inside of.
Do you know what? That's a really good question, Paul. That has been by far my biggest challenge in growing a consultancy, by far. Because I started at 27, very low market presence, left the industry as a commercial manager, having only worked at 3 companies. And I had no formal networking, marketing background to kind of understand how to grow a business. So it came down again to pure graft and tenacity, speaking to as many people as possible, trying to work a network and get as many warm intros. And also what's really helped us to scale is getting a foot in the door somewhere, showing grassroots of how good our service offering actually is, and then being able to grow quite organically from within there. So, yeah, and we're currently up to 11 clients.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Where do you go to get yourself in front of those people? Was that networking event? How do you go about getting yourself in front of them in the first place?
Yeah, so a lot of it was warm intros from people that I had known in the past.
Good.
And, a warm intro doesn't always have to be super warm as well. It could be someone introduces me to you, we meet up for a coffee, and then the next person that you introduce me to now still classifies as warm intro.
Yeah.
We don't have a history working together, but you might you might be able to go as far as to say, met Sunny before, seems really switched on, knows what he's talking about. I think he might be able to help, and that sort of works. So I think, you get 10 people that know 5 people, all of a sudden you've got 50 people you could potentially have a conversation with. So, that's been it for us.
Amazing. And what has that strategy evolved now a bit further down the line in terms of how you're going to continue to grow the business?
Yeah. So that's where the vast majority of my focus is now. It's all around BD, because that's the problem. You get to a certain headcount, you secure a certain level of work, and then you are always worried about being able to keep on top of that for your team. And I think as an MD, you have a responsibility towards your people to make sure that you are envisaging the pinch points that are going to come and securing the work and the right kind of work to suit. So from our perspective at the moment, our sales pipeline is, what we show in red on our metrics, because I want it to be 3 times our targeted turnover. It's currently set at 1.7 times our targeted turnover, so we know we need to increase that quite significantly. So I'm putting all of my effort into building that. And in terms of strategy, LinkedIn has been a big part of that. So since the turn of the year, we made a decision that I would try and position myself from a thought leadership perspective in that tier 1 space, and work hard to do that through publishing a weekly newsletter and through putting out posts that speak to that audience. We kind of take the view that LinkedIn is more of an attraction vehicle rather than a proposition one.
Mm-hmm.
So, we do, me in particular, I do reach out to people as a DM and just intro myself. Don't sell anything. Don't ask if they've got anything we can help with. And then, use that to get the people to hopefully look at your profile and then look at your posts as they come along. So building brand presence is one. We've also got a BD that supports us in the business as well, who has previously worked in the tier 1 space, and more warm intros. We're trying to get that going.
Brilliant. So have you had any, would you say, noticeable wins off of the back of what you've done on LinkedIn to date?
Yeah. I mean, some of our biggest clients has come off of stuff that we posted on LinkedIn.
Brilliant.
Investors have come off of LinkedIn.
Right.
For our live-in side, property opportunities. In fact, when I think about it, most of the big wins that we've had, if not directly through a LinkedIn post, has come through someone who I've met on LinkedIn, met up for a coffee, and then they've connected me with someone else afterwards. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you that because I need people to hear this, because I bang on to a lot of what's been really interesting so far, Sunny, doing the Growing Consultancies podcast. I speak to a lot of business owners, and they're good. They're really good at what they do, but they need to work a lot harder on the brand and their marketing, because they can be the best at what they do, but if people don't know you exist, then they're not going to give you any work. That's reality.
So I've found that that's actually been the hardest challenge, moving away from a very good technician to being a business owner. And I had to be honest with myself that I was a good quantity surveyor, but a very inexperienced business owner.
27, fair enough. You would have
been. But even now, I think at 6 years in, I don't necessarily feel experienced. You are very much learning on the fly, but you do realize that they are very different skill sets. Like how good you are as a technician, it doesn't scale. You can bill £250,000 a year, and that is it. That is the height of what you can do, no matter how good you are.
Yeah.
So a lot of what I've had to learn is about creating strategy, creating systems, leveraging people to help get us the growth that we're after. And that's a very different skill set, and one that I'm glad to be learning. And I've got a couple of non-exec directors that help me to do that as well.
Again, brilliant. Again, a lot of business I speak to do not have any non-exec directors, and the good ones are worth the weight in gold, because they not necessarily to show you how to run the business, that's not what they're there to do, but certainly to mentor you, to challenge you.
Absolutely.
I think is important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So 6 years running, what would you say, either mistakes you've made or lessons you've learned over those 6 years? Is there anything you would have done differently if you started from scratch again with the knowledge you've got now?
Yeah, I would have come off the tools a lot earlier.
Yeah.
I was still fee earning up until Q3 last year. It was way too late. And perhaps irresponsible as well to leave the business without a full-time MD, given the size that we were. So I'd definitely do that. I would hire sooner as well. Overhead staff, mainly to push BD.
Yeah.
Again, it's been a much harder graft than I think it has needed to be, to get to where we are.
Yeah.
Those would probably be my two biggest ones. Yeah. Work. I know everyone says it and it's quite a cliche, but work on the business.
Yeah.
And that's tough because you're fee earning and you don't have residual income coming in from anywhere, depending on where you start. So you have to earn a certain level of fee.
Yeah.
But what I would encourage people to do is just earn fee for lights on money and no more. There's a real discipline to say, I'm not going to take on that work when I should. Everything else that you get beyond lights on money, sub-consult it out, take a hit on your recovery, take a small margin and keep focusing on growing the business.
Brilliant.
Along with the strategy.
Yeah, brilliant. Listen, a lot of what you'll say now, I think a lot of individuals a lot older than you don't understand this about the way they run their business. 100%. Of course, there's got to be a reasonable balance between the number of fee earners to the number of non-fee earners.
Absolutely.
But some of those non-fee earners massively free you up to get on with things.
Yes.
My first employee, Haley, who we just met earlier today, doesn't do anything to do. She's not a fee earner, hasn't been from the start, but straight away, the amount of things she stopped me having to do.
Yes.
That I think a lot of small business owners either take some perverse pride in, like, don't know, credit control.
Right.
Invoicing, whatever, HR,
Yeah.
all these bits that actually are crucial, but you can probably hire somebody who's really good at them. Maybe not your strength, and you can get on with doing the bits that are important in the business.
Yeah, absolutely.
And especially that bit about, like you say, I think sales and marketing kind of go hand in hand. They're both critically important. But again, hiring people to do that and help you expand the business, I think is pretty smart. And I think a lot of other business owners just don't do it. They want to almost kind of wear it as a badge of honor that they do that, which is madness, I think, in some cases. Are you thinking about how you kind of succession plan what you're doing in terms of, right, getting to the point where you have to start thinking about a leadership team below you?
Yeah, definitely. So we've got a leadership team at the moment. There's 3 of us.
Okay,
So
good.
I've got our operations director,
Yep.
and our head of people.
Brilliant.
So we form a leadership team at the moment.
Mhm.
For the next 18 months, I'm gonna try and learn how to be a good MD
Brilliant.
and train Tom,
Right.
our operations director,
Right.
to be able to do the same.
Right.
And then I'm concurrently receiving some external training on how to eventually transition to a role of CEO.
Amazing.
So that's what our succession plan looks like. Hopefully within the next 18 to 24 months, that will be actuated, and we've got to merit it and build the structure underneath to suit.
Mhm.
And in, it's maybe not so much relating to succession planning, but certainly in terms of development about where we want to see the business go, that we're blessed to be at the headcount that we're at and not any bigger. I had in my mind, even as far as up until Q2 last year, get to a 250 headcount business. My view on that is very different at the moment. I would sooner see us get to a 80 headcount business with the capacity to do the amount of fee that 250 would warrant.
Okay, so this is a big theme at the moment, isn't it? And a lot of there's a lot of really intelligent people in the wider world.
Yeah.
A lot of people on the other side of the pond.
Yeah.
Who are looking at what this transition is going to be for all of us across every industry, across every discipline. And there's a big noise now, isn't there, about can actually a smaller consultancy generate just as much income if they use the right tools and systems? Obviously, I think it's Peter who put me in touch with you in the first place.
Yes.
Obviously, they're very much, obviously, Peter's been on the podcast, they're very much of the opinion that's where it's going.
Yep.
I believe there's a spectrum of what people believe the future is going to look like.
I agree.
From Luddites who say it ain't going to change, which is completely insane, to ones who think we'll all be out of a job in the next 3 years.
Yeah.
I probably sit somewhere in the middle of that camp, or
so do I.
Where I don't believe that will be the case, but
Yes.
I believe you'd be also naive to be at this end of the spectrum and not making it just. So talk me through that. What's persuaded you and how you adjusted your strategy to go from we were aiming for 250, and that's been the way every consultancy has grown.
Yep.
For the last probably 100 years.
Headcount model. Absolutely.
To now saying actually there's going to be a blended thing between needing really good people, but also relying heavily on tech, AI to get us there. So, but you're talking about reducing the perceived size of your business that you want it to be by 2/3.
Absolutely.
So talk us through that.
Absolutely. So I've been consuming the same content as everyone else about where the world is going.
Yeah.
Not really knowing what to do with it.
Does some of it scare you? But you listen to.
I think so. Yeah, it does. It does because, but it's way beyond what happens to our little business. It's about
for sure
the whole structure of society and what that could turn into.
Absolutely.
I think that's the bit that is perhaps worrying. But I also don't like to spend too much time worrying about it. Not because I have a bury in the sand, your head in the sand mentality, but I have control what you can actually control and do what you can do something about. And remain vigilant and nimble.
Mhm.
That's the key
Mhm.
in my mind.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, a little bit of it is worrying, but I think that there is a very clear threat to any consultancy model.
Mhm.
The timeline I'm not clear on.
Mm.
Is this going to be 3 years? Is it 5? Is it 10? Is it 15? But at some point, there is going to be a serious threat to the consultancy model, and that's because I think that intelligence is becoming a increasingly diminished commodity. You know, I don't see a scenario where my kids are going uni to study law or accountancy or whatever it happens to be, because the intelligence, which previously was a differentiator, will now become, you know, freely available, and it'll be whoever can leverage the tech stack to spit that intelligence out and do the role that I think is going to clean up and make redundant the traditional consultancy model at some point and in some form. So on that spectrum, where I've decided to push the business is into a hybrid approach, where you still have a very skilled technician on the other side, but they are able to do so much more work within their work week because of the AI tools that they have being leveraged for them, which turns them into a bit more of a checker and stakeholder manager. But a lot of the grunt work actually being done by the AI stack that we're building in the background. Yeah.
Good. The obvious question, this is probably beyond our pay grade, and we don't know. And to your point, there's no point worrying, because you can't change what you can't change. It will be where it will be within reason. You can make some adjustments and you can adjust your strategy, but ultimately, as I say, depending on where people sit on this spectrum of what is the correct outcome and what it will be, you know, you listen to some individuals and it's truly scary, and these are individuals who really are intelligent, who with due respect, probably more intelligent than 99% of the population, and they believe that it will change things very, very quickly, and we're just at the edge of a very steep wall upwards now in terms of the exponential growth. It's like any exponential curve; it starts very slow and then just rockets.
Yeah.
So again, it's probably beyond the point of this podcast, but we may as well ask you. You seem like you're well read and probably consuming a lot of stuff I'm consuming. But what are your children going to do for work? Well, I've got 2 teenage daughters. What are they going to do for work? It's quite interesting, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
And the honest answer is I do not have a clue.
Yeah,
I do not have a clue. Do you know what? I read something a little while ago. It said that from a technological standpoint, humans have made more advancement in the last 80 years than they have in the last 200,000. And I found that really interesting. The problem is, if you were born in the last 80 years, you have been born at the time of this parabolic rise of human progression, not just technologically, but in all areas. And so for us, it's our normal. Born in the early 90s and still remember warming your TV up to get it started, and getting a Game Boy and all that sort of stuff, to where we are today, to having an Apple Watch or whatever seems like it's leaps and bounds. And then the idea of what's going to happen now in another 30 years, I mean, I don't know. I've been looking at podcasts that talk about longevity and where that's heading, the ability to prolong life, what that will do to the landscape of someone's career if they can now live 150 years rather than 70 or 80. Does it mean that will they have 2 or 3 careers? And then what will that look like at the time? I simply don't know. But I think, again, all you can do is try and position yourself as best as possible. That what I'm trying to do for my family, and I'm trying to encourage my team to do as well, is to try and get some assets behind you that are non-AI impacted, hopefully. And that might be down to stuff, relating to agriculture, a service that is deeply linked with some sort of human connection. Property is obviously an example as well.
So let's get around something we probably can control. How do you think, and you've touched on it just then, I guess, a moment ago, how do you think the QS, the humble QS, is going to be affected? Let's bring it back to, let's forget whatever long-term horizon, because I agree with none of us truly understand or can comprehend what the long-term horizon is. But let's say in the next, and this is probably open to a lot of debate, Sunny, in the industry. How do you think the QS profession is going to be affected in the next 5 years?
I think it's going to be heavily impacted by the culture of the industry. Yeah, I think it's more of a C-suite discussion across the industry about how they decide they're going to function. I think everything is some sort of game theory, right? Everyone has to agree upon a manner in which we're going to conduct business, and that will heavily start to dictate how everyone plays a game underneath them. So if we continue in a relationship-led manner of agreeing cost and final accounts, I think the role of the QS will remain fairly steady.
Yeah, okay.
Actually. Good. Especially from a commercial management function. And when I talk about QS, I'm speaking specifically about the commercial manager.
Yeah.
So someone who's involved in procurement right through to final account. Sure. I think your pre-con stuff will very quickly and clearly move towards automation more than ever before, because if we can get the data integrity right, it's going to be a no-brainer for people to decide upon, and that's the right answer. We do it all the time now for loads of other stuff. But I think the commercial manager, there's a heavy relationship piece there. And I think that, a lot of the time we prepare documents and contract notices all for it to be bundled up at the end, and it all come down to some sort of deal or relationship, or there needs to be some sort of negotiation. You don't get to a point where there's a claim or a quantum that you're building up where two people can objectively look at it and go, that's right. It's not quite that way. There's always a nuance of opinion that impacts how you feed the model, what data you put in, what you tell it to process. That will still need to be discussed and debated if the construction industry decides to continue doing business that way. And so if that happens, I think that the role of the QS will remain fairly stable. Okay. But he or she will need a bolt-on, a bit like an Iron Man suit, to assist them to move at the pace and the velocity that the person will be able to do across the desk. So if I am sticking in early warning notices to you, and you have an AI which is reading that, generating a compensation event and firing it back to me before I've had a chance to go to the toilet, unless I am equipped with the exact same tech stack as you, I'm really going to struggle, and you are going to flood me. So I think that's going to become a norm, like how the QS has had to learn to use Bluebeam, email, all that sort of stuff.
So if you were let's say advising a 16-year-old now, and they're 2 years away from making a choice about what they do, because obviously they've got to go through college, whatever you do, A-levels or whatever you do, you've got to go through 2 years, 18 before you really start to make a decision. Yeah. Would you still advise them to go down training as a QS?
Honestly, probably not. Yeah, probably not. Unless they really loved the industry. Unless they really, if they turned around and they said, I love construction sites, I have a real passion for construction, fairly savvy with numbers, then I tell them to go for it, but perhaps even lead into a more technically focused role, like an engineer, like a site engineer, or a project manager, someone who's, looking after the day-to-day of construction. I think if they were, which most 16-year-olds are, money motivated or looking to do something that could be stable, I think that there's a lot more easier and more appetizing avenues to make a living. And that's probably why the data continues to show that we are struggling so much, where we have this Asian demographic in our trade and fewer grads coming through each year, for probably that exact reason. When I started off as a QS, I started because my older brother said to me, you can make 40 grand as a QS. And I was like, 40 grand, no way. I could support a family. I could do anything on it. Yeah. Whereas I think that's probably the money that maybe assistants and grad QSs are at now. And actually they look at that at 16, 17, 18 and go, that's not as attractive as it was 15, 17 years ago.
So I think more my question with that is, do you think, one of the big questions is, so what you've alluded to there with the model is, if you're an experienced commercial manager, you should be okay.
Yeah.
You should be okay. Is it likely then that the industry is going to need as many entry-level QSs, or will it employ as many entry-level QSs?
I don't know. I think there's two questions. Will the industry have an appetite for entry-level QSs, and then will they have the entry-level QSs who are interested in filling those roles? My first answer was, do I think they'll have the QSs that are interested? I think that's going to continue to diminish as time goes on. If I were to hazard a guess, but you never know. Macroeconomic changes could make everyone now in tech sales redundant in no time at all, and now there's a huge migration into something like construction.
Well, I think there's a lot of people who believe that will be the case.
So that's also possible.
Great time to be a tradesperson, I think.
Well, absolutely. So I think that's one possibility. But I think in terms of will we still need trainee QSs, assistant QSs in the way that we did before? Certainly no. I think the answer would be, getting people to copy stuff from one spreadsheet over to this stuff, to, get a PDF into a Word document and then fill it out and get the columns populated. I think all of that stuff will fall into the realms of automation quite quickly. But I do think that we will need to keep topping up our people headcount problem, because we just have a lack of talent.
We do.
And if that is the case, I think the training model for a QS will change yet again. And bearing in mind, it's already happened. My generation is probably the very last who started on site with a scale rule and some tracing paper and got told to do a handwritten bill of quantities.
Right.
And that's not even across the board. Some in my cohort would have said they've got no experience doing that.
Right.
But I think my generation would have been the very last of that, who actually know how to measure. Most generations who have come up after that are out and out commercial managers. They are focused on contract formation, risk allocation, contract admin, and they know very little from a measuring technical sort of perspective. And I think that might iterate once again, where you are bringing in grads, and therefore they don't necessarily need to be QS grads, although they'll become that, who you are teaching how to leverage the tech stack and how to validate the tech stack to produce the necessary, contract comms that might be needed at that point in time.
Equally, though, it's making sure that what you will have learned from some tedious days as a young QS is some of the basics and your basic stack up. So the inherent challenge, it's not just for QS, it's for all professional service sectors, I agree, for most industries actually, is that some of the boring stuff you used to do, and it doesn't have to be QSs, take solicitors. Some of the boring stuff solicitors have to do as a trainee solicitor, read through contracts page to page, identify issues. If you get to a point where you're coming into the industry and AI is telling you what the answer is, how do you know whether the answer is correct or incorrect?
Absolutely. And I think that, one of two things is going to happen. Either AI will have to be accepted as a single source of truth. So what it distills and synthesizes for you and kicks out, we will both have to sit there and agree that is what the drawings say, without any validation.
Right.
Or if that isn't the case and AI doesn't reach the maturity in the time that we're looking at, then it's going to be a big problem, because you're still going to need to be able to validate a model. And if, someone who's come into the industry in that environment doesn't know how to do that, I'm going to sit there and still be able to tear them apart, because I'm going to be able to poke holes in how that model's been validated in the first place. It's a crystal ball, really. And I think a lot of it just comes down to remaining sensitive to the data and remaining sensitive to the developments as they're moving along, and just making sure that, your business pivots as best as possible for the benefit of your people and for your clients as well.
I can see why Peter told me to get you on this now, mate, honestly, because I genuinely think it scares me how many people are not having this conversation. It scares me how many people are either burying their head in the sand or completely dismissive of it being a reality.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind. I think there's a really big swathe within the consultancy world, the construction consultancy world, who are just like lemmings, just walking towards the edge of a cliff, and they don't understand.
Are you seeing that even amongst tier 1 and tier 2 consultants?
Some, yeah. I'd say there's some who are exceptional, who get it, and they're investing accordingly in terms of their tech stack and what they're doing and how they're doing, and they recognise there's a future to it.
Yeah.
I think there's still some bloody big tier ones who are still very traditional, and don't appreciate. I think there's also another mentality. I think a lot of people are going, we're ready, we're gonna employ AI, but we just need to see. We need to let it run its course for a bit longer before we decide which horse we're going to bet on in terms of the different AI products, let's say, that may be out there. The problem with that is still there's an even bigger piece, and you probably alluded to this earlier about the industry as a whole. There's a bigger piece around cultural adaptation and bringing people on a journey to make use of it all and do it all properly.
That's tough. Tough. There's a huge psychological challenge with, I don't envy consultancies with 2,000, 3,000 headcounts, because,
or even the tier one contractors, exactly the same
or even
challenge.
tier one contractors, there's a big culture shift. We are inherently slower to adopt technology as an industry, but also as well, people are potentially training and iterating on what is eventually going to make them redundant. And there's also a psychological factor with getting people to buy in
rebellion
as well.
Yeah,
exactly. I think in some ways, smaller consultancies, and Peter alluded to this on his episode of the podcast as well, the opportunities to build an AI native business is actually a huge advantage. And it reminds me of something that I heard, it was a few years ago now in a podcast, and it said, back in the mid to late 1800s, people were working out what feed you should give to a horse to improve it, and what are the best sort of horseshoe, and what's the best sort of rest and recovery to get to optimize your horse. And someone was building the car, and that was it. When someone eventually built that whole market and model was completely redundant. And I said it to Tom, my number two, and I said, look, I am mindful that we've worked so hard to build the business to where it is today, and yet I do not want a car to be built to come up from underneath us. We are the right size now, where we should be pivoting, and we should be doing something about that. And we since made the decision to build out a proprietary FiveThirds IMS, which is going to be like an Ironman suit for each QS for every commission that they're on, to help see how we can get AI integrated in for each one.
So what are you currently using from a tech stack in the business at the moment?
Not enough. Gemini Pro for synthesizing documents and getting that down. AI Notion as personal assistants. And that's the vast majority of it at the moment. So we are gonna, but the next 18 months, 24 months again is a real high priority for us to get this AI stack built that is a proprietary product for FiveThirds. You can't stick it in a pen stick and take it with you when you go. And we'll patent the software so that every new commission that we get on, we will be able to look at what the key deliverables are that take up all of the time, and then work with our AI engineer to develop a tech stack to do every single one of those deliverables for that tenure of that commission. Someone logs in the morning, they've got a cost plan to do, they drag and drop the information into there. It takes 80% of the way, they can validate, and they can use that to take that forward. And hopefully we'll be able to improve our own productivity through that and pass on some of those savings to our clients too.
At what point will you employ an AI engineer? Or
so we've already appointed one on a fractional basis.
Right,
we're going to do that for 3 months, and depending on the progress that we make in there, we're going to get someone in full time.
Brilliant, good. Again, I don't think a lot of the businesses are doing that much larger than yours, let alone your size. So amazing. This is going to melt some people's heads, this episode. I can tell you that in a good way. Well, maybe not in a good way. Not for them. Some of them are going to be like, oh, my word. I'll say, it's really fascinating, isn't it? Because we've got to have these discussions, have these debates, and equally recognise that actually none of us have a clue in some ways what's going down the line. But you've still to at least be playing and be playing with these tools, thinking about what could be, and trying to think 2-3 years ahead, not in terms of necessarily where your business is going to be, but where the world and the industry is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And starting to set out a game plan to get you guys there in a good place where you're still making money and moving forward.
Yeah.
I don't think many are. Is my gut feel. It's been an awesome chat, Sunny. Thank you.
Very welcome, Paul. Thank you.
I've got 2 questions, of which you'll absolutely nail the second question. I keep on asking some of those questions. I don't always have an answer to this question.
Yeah.
But I'm 99% sure you'll have an answer to the question. So the first question is, who would you say has been your best boss or mentor in your career, and why?
I've had a few actually that
Can I have more than one? That sort of
yeah. I've had a few that can stand out. And I think how they've been characterized is, they've given me a lot of responsibility and autonomy way before I had the experience to suit.
Good.
But they could see that I had the aptitude to do that, and were just able to give me the guidance. And I think that's probably, there's 2 in my mind, and that's probably what I can think about was consistent with both of them. You know, one when I was an assistant, perhaps even a trainee, and the other one when I was a senior going into sort of commercial manager role. And in both instances, they were able to chuck work at me commiserate to my aptitude, not to my actual experience on paper. And that gave me the space to thrive and to grow. So they're characterized by people that don't hold you back. They encourage you to push on, and they'll always be there as a support for you. Good.
So second question, if you knew someone who was starting out in business,
Yep.
would there be a particular book that you would give them?
Yes. Oh yeah, there's loads. So I read 2 books a month, and they are heavily weighted towards business and self-development. Probably the most impactful book I've ever read in terms of what's been able to be applied in a business is a book called Who Not How.
Right.
And the author's name is escaping me at the minute, but Who Not How, you won't be able to miss it. It's a yellow book with blue writing. And the central idea is that if, as a business owner, you should stop trying to work out how to do stuff and work out how to identify who can do that for you and how you can get them to leverage them to act in your behalf. And that is actually a big problem for technical people turned business owners, because they're such good technicians and they're so clever. Because that's what happens in my mind. I think the preeminent people in every single cohort tend to go out and do something by themselves, for themselves. But that's the trap. You can trick yourself into thinking that you are better at everything than everyone, and you're not. But or that you are more or that you are better placed to do things than other people, and you are not. And the idea of the book is that you shouldn't be spending any time working out how to do stuff. You know, it would be easy for me to turn around and say, okay, I'm going to work out how to build a recruitment business from scratch. It can't be that hard, blah, 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 blah. Or I could turn around and say, I've got a recruitment need. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to give Paul a ring and actually get him to do that for me. Oh, I haven't got the budget to pay Paul. Okay, well, what can I offer Paul instead that might leverage him to want to do that for me? And that just continues to scale. So, you know, BD, for as a young founder, you think to yourself, okay, well, I'll just solely hit LinkedIn or get on the phone or whatever it happens to be. But there's people that have done this before and have done it successfully. So don't work out how to do it. Work out who's done it before. And then are they willing to help you? And if not, how can you get them in a position where they're willing to help you? And the key thing that you get from that is leverage. And what the book describes is leverage is the delta between how much effort you put into pushing a thing and how far it goes. You know, so if it's just you, that thing only goes as far as what you're going to move it. When you have leverage, you put in the same effort and it goes a lot further because of what you've got behind you. And so as a business owner, get good at identifying good who's for all of the key things that move your business in the right direction. So for example, for a B2B business, like in a consultant world, like what we are, you have to get clients and deliver work. You know, our business model is simple. We buy and sell time. So you need someone to help you find that talent and then you need to add value and then find someone to sell it onto. We're often good at the adding value bit because that's what our jobs have been, but we're not so good at finding the right people. We're not so good at finding who to sell that time to.
Yeah.
And so it's then working out, okay, well, who is, and how do I employ them to come and do that for me?
Brilliant. No, look, I don't think I've read that book. I definitely haven't.
It's brilliant book. Yeah, really, really good.
Amazing.
Really good.
That's been absolutely amazing. Sonny, thank you for coming on board.
Thanks,
I know you had a bit of a dilemma as to whether you were going to, but I think genuinely people will they'll either get a lot of value out of it or they'll be shit scared after the end of it. One or the other will find out. But
I hope it's a lot. I do.
I'm sure it'll be both. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
I hope the business continues to grow, both sides of the business.
Thank you very much. Thank you.